It is the November 10th meeting of the Finance Committee 2020. We are here tonight to go through the last few items on our special town meeting warrants. We have some meeting minutes. If there are any reports from other boards and committees, we'll obviously go through that, and then discussion and adjournment. So without further ado, let's go through so we can make sure we use Connor and Wendy and Greg's time appropriately, the remaining warrants. So I have 2, 4, 5, and then 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19 are the ones that are still outstanding. So if we jump into 2, it's transfer to stabilization fund, the standard one we do on a regular basis. Moves the sum of available free cash or other available revenues to the stabilization fund in accordance with our financial management guidelines and the ongoing goal to build reserves. Do we have final numbers now, Connor?
So I actually have a presentation that kind of incorporates Article 2, 4, and 5 that covers all the budget related stuff. So if you're willing, I would actually ask, because I'm here the whole time anyway, if perhaps the committee could take zoning now, so Greg can kind of walk you through Articles 15 through 19 and get out of here and not have to subject himself to my budget presentation.
Again.
If you're open to that, I'll pull the zoning related slides from Stephanie up.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a great idea. So, Greg, it's going to be your show. So when we looked at 15, 16, 17, 18, like obviously there's a lot of verbiage here, there's a lot of text. We figured it's probably easier to just go through. Connor's going to present some slides. We'd love to have your feedback and your potentially minimizing the textual nature of this into something that's a little bit more consumable for those of us that are not zoning experts. And then we'll have questions and usual.
I will be succinct, pithy, hopefully a dash of humor like Michael Scott. No. So,
language, Greg.
All right. So all 5 of these articles this year basically tie into economic development. Article 15, very quickly, really what it does, a few years back, we formed Queesic Commercial District A, B, and C, which basically runs from along 138, runs from Stone Forge down to about Dean's Fuel. So Subdistrict A, which is right in the vicinity of where 123 and 138 intersect. There's a existing plaza across from the CVS, has a dry cleaner in it. Last fall, the company signed a long-term lease to put a laundromat in there. It was discovered during the permitting process by the applicant that they didn't realize laundromats were not allowed in Queesic Subdistrict A. After speaking with members of the Economic Development Council, Planning Board, and the DPW, we thought, wouldn't it be good to first get a little more sewer flowing in the sewer, get some fees for the town, and put a laundromat closer to Stonehill College. So basically, long story short, we're adding Subdistrict A into the allowable use of a laundromat and changing. Right now it says hand laundry, which is rather ambiguous. So we're just changing in the bylaw from hand laundry to laundromat and allowing Queesic Subdistrict A.
Any questions from the committee on that one? That's pretty straightforward, I think. I can't see everybody. Hold on. If you do have a question and I can't see you, just shout it out. I think that's none. So with that one seems pretty cut and dry. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to recommend Article 15.
Second? Can I get a second?
Second.
Davis. Okay, let me go down the list. Healy.
Yes.
Stacy.
Yes.
Tamelio.
Yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Who else is on here? Jeez. Stebbins.
Yes.
Did anyone else join while I was in the middle of doing this? Let me look. No, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then myself is a yes. That's everybody, right? Okay. So that one is recommended. All right, let's move on to 16.
Article 16, this one's a little more fun. As you know, planning board in other parts of town, we've been pushing 3 walkable neighborhoods, 3 downtown areas for the last decade. The most obvious and the oldest in town is the Village Business downtown. 5 years ago, we formed the Village Business District, which you can see here in yellow, which basically is most of downtown. On its western end, starts with the 2 small buildings around the corner. On the left from the old bank building, 6668 Main Street, across from Oaks Ames Hall. Goes all the way down to Shangri-La on Mechanic and Main Street, and then everything across the street up to and including Oxford Cleaners and the first couple buildings on each side of Center Street, as well as Mr. King's apartment complex, Lincoln Street School. We are looking to allow mixed use via special permit through the planning board in this area. Mixed use being commercial or professional on the first floor and dwelling units above, be they apartments or condominium or single ownership. Historically, there are 8 buildings, at least 8 buildings in this district that have apartments. And we were looking to allow it, like I say, through special permit. It is in a local historic district, so there's obviously sensitivity to that. So you need to work with the applicant, come in ahead of time and really massage the project prior to applying to make a successful special permit and to allow the input from the town and the historical commission. We looked at a number of scenarios for different ratios based on some of our existing mixed use zoning in town and what some similar towns do in similar situations. And we've settled on 1 residential unit for every 2,500 square feet of land area. Just to give you an example, the average land area in this neck of the woods is about 4,600 square feet. There's a high of 133 acres at the Northeastern Grammar and a low of 1,900 square feet at 150 Main Street. So the farmer's daughter, for example, under the scenario would be allowed 2, and there's actually 6 in there now, but it's in that whole block, so it's a little. I should say would be allowed 6, and they have 6. Bill's House of Pizza would be allowed 6, they have 7. So we're not looking to expand any of the densities. We're just looking to allow it through an easier or to allow it. It's not allowed right now, other than through pre-existing non-conforming. And again, just looking to help create a walkable neighborhood to where people can walk to services, more increased demand for restaurants and other businesses in the area.
Would this be anything to do with new construction? That's what you're saying. The special sort of engagement would be. If there was a need for new construction, that would be something that would have to go through.
Yeah, for example, if you look at the slide to the left, you think we have 114 Main Street, which is the vacant area right now to the left of the farmer's daughter. Originally was the green building. The name of the insurance company escapes me, but Mr. Howe owns that property, and he had come in previously prior to renovating the church, and they were going to put a restaurant there, and then had trouble. The deal fell apart while going through ZBA. But so that would be a new building that obviously would have to be worked on with historical.
Sure.
There's been talk of maybe expanding some other ones in town, but it would, for the most part, it wouldn't be new construction because most of these are local historic districts. So it'd be working with the existing historical structures and, maybe adding on to them.
Okay. Thanks. Does anyone else have any questions?
Hey, Greg, is this total area divided by 2,500 square feet of dwelling units on this total area, or is it there can be 1 dwelling unit for each individual 2,500 square feet? In other words, is there a risk is the wrong word, I'm sorry. Is there a possibility in this scenario of, for example, that lot next to Farmer's Daughter being, say, an apartment building with 20 dwelling units?
No, it's not. It has to be It has to be mixed use. Like I say, and it would be through special permit. So there's nothing by right. So it even allows the planning board to make sure we get a project that we'd want for the town. But so 114 Main Street, for example, that lot is 9,400 square feet. So that would allow 4 residential units. So there's no scenario right now where they could get 20.
Okay, so you can't take the whole PZB and
Correct. Right. Just it's
put all the
on a
units
per
like
lot
in
basis.
one big building in the middle.
Right.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool.
Anybody else? Silence is golden. I will take yet another motion if so needed. Donald, jump at once.
Motion to recommend?
There it is.
Second.
Who seconded that?
Jen.
Then did. Okay, let's go down the list. Healy,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Tamelio,
Yes.
DePietro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. 16 passes.
Thank you.
Moving right along.
All right. Article 17 is the creation of the Furnace Village District, which encompasses, as you can see from the map here, it's basically the 106/123 corridor, with, sometimes known as 5 corners. Looking at the map, just to give you the area, what you see on the left in the red is up, think Big Y, Target, Starbucks. We're getting a standalone Starbucks up there. Isn't that exciting? You can see 106 and 123 running left to right here. On the opposite end, in sort of the salmon or the light pink, is Shaw's, and typically the 5 corners that we're calling the Depot Street subdistrict. I should circle back. The red that I started with is the Eastman Street subdistrict. In the middle is the residential subdistrict, which consists of basically all those existing residences that we see. And then that small pocket of blue in the middle is right where Pequantucket intersects with Foundry Street. Think of like the old Keach Law Building. There's 4 properties there that are existing zoned business, and we kept it that way, not to upset. There's the auto dealer and a couple of businesses there. Again, looking to create walkable neighborhoods. We envision a scenario. There's a project. I don't know if you're familiar with the compact neighborhood overlay district that we did last year. Rick Lincoln's project at the Foundry, Sawmill Village. Hopefully, we'll be coming to a successful permitting conclusion in the next few months. That is 46 standalone homes capped at 1,700 square feet. They give architectural approval to the town through the planning board. Some great architectural, all New England house styles. There's going to be a really neat kind of a clock tower feature at the entrance for a community center. Cleaning up a lot of the river there from its old industrial, and most importantly, in some ways, in terms of mitigation, we'll be constructing a traffic light and passing lanes at the intersection of Foundry and Pequantucket, which anybody familiar with that area knows that will go quite a ways in helping out. And money's left over after the construction of the lights will go towards redesigning of this road. The goal would be within 10 years, going through the whole process with the state to rebuild this part of 106 with sidewalks, benches, green spaces, and widening. And so to that point, we wanted to give the businesses and the landowners, property owners, as many options as possible. And again, I should say this all ties into the diff. If you remember what Stephanie and Connor worked so hard last year on getting the diff through to reduce the betterment fees. And a big part of that obviously depends on economic development. And anybody that knows about planning, you can look at this and see this area really is ripe now that we have sewer coming in from Mansfield from the Avalon project. So basically we're allowing in the 2 sub-districts, left and right, Eastman and Depot, different versions of ability, same thing to do mixed use for there are scenarios where, okay, all through special permit again, so the town, so we can make sure we get the special type of project that I think Easton deserves, and allows us to have more of a collaborative partnership with developers. And there'll be scenarios where, okay, what you could do, not by right, but through special permit, then you can add additional units if you make the units affordable. And then depending on so those are in those two districts. In the residential area, there's potential to add we're going to 15,000 square foot lots down from 40,000. Now, before everybody is aghast with that, that really will result, in 5 to 7 potential new homes, small size village homes, all through special permit. And if you ever really take the time to look at that area, there's some fantastic historic structures there. So we also have a program in here to reward with a density bonus for folks that restore and preserve their historic homes, where potentially they could add a unit or two. So what we're trying to do is create some new residences in this area, not hundreds. It's a very small district when you really get down to it, but to allow some possibilities, so there are people to use those sidewalks and to walk. And with Avalon and just with all the existing residences, you could see how between the ponds and the tying in of the emerald, the green necklace of all the green space that will be accessed through Rick Lincoln's project, this really can become a fantastic, a new old neighborhood, if you will, in Easton. And it's unique. You walk in, at first it starts, if you start up on Eastman Street, you have a lot of industrial commercial buildings, then you have the ponds, you have some historic buildings, you have houses, and it goes back to commercial. So we've worked on this for about 20 months. We worked with many neighborhood meetings, public meetings. We had consultants. We had 3 different town planners get their hands on this too. So it was a good collaborative process, a lot of feedback. And I think it's I'm proud of the product we put out there. I think it can deliver a special type of neighborhood, which I think is what Easton deserves, right? So we're all attracted to this town. The gifts we were given many years ago. We're just looking to add to those. Sorry, not as succinct as I thought it would be. But.
In depth, though, which is what we.
That's.
So just one question on my side. Right where the existing business district is, the light at Pequannock and whatnot, that's right next door to the existing project that's going on right now. Obviously that's all tying in here as well, but the widening, the current plan for the widening of that road all the way through, that's a 10-year plan. That's something that.
Well, right at the light, part of Rick Lincoln's project, part of the engineering is they will be constructing a passing lane, if you will. So there'll be the design's not final yet, but there'll be a dedicated turning left, I would imagine, into Pequannock from.
Yep.
So that will happen when Rick and his firm, when they construct this. That'll happen in the next year or two, assuming they depending on their construction schedule.
Sure.
After that, after talking, we've had a number of meetings, Connor, myself, Stephanie, Dave Fields, and the proponents. And the thought is, and Dave knows much more about this obviously than I, but we'd talk about how it's probably about a 10-year process to get this road rebuilt, like with the sidewalks and all. So we're planners, we have to do these things ahead of time, but so it's built into Rick's project. But much like they're getting ready to redo 123 from down towards Fernandez, and that the 2-year process between the public meetings and eminent domain, etc. So
yeah, if I could add on that. So as far as 10 years is a realistic window, what we're talking about, Greg's right that a light would be an immediate benefit of Sawmill as part of mitigation for that discrete project. But I just want to be clear for anyone living in that area who's had quite a bit of construction recently. We're not talking about a major roadway project into the future. That would be through what's called a TIP project, traffic improvement plan, which is a regionally administered, federally and state dollar funded process, where usually the way to get yourself as a municipality into the hopper is by fronting the money for design, whether through local appropriations or through mitigation money like Greg is talking about. So this project, in addition to providing immediate benefit, obviously from a housing perspective, tying into that sewer and having the light, if funding is available, that could go towards design to get Easton put us in line for federal dollars down the road for something like the Depot Street project that you'll see next summer.
Excellent. Yeah, I just want to make sure I heard it correctly, that I understood that obviously time may vary, but I want to make sure I wasn't expecting it to be as much as I would like the light there tomorrow. I wasn't expecting it to be in that room. Anybody else have any questions?
I'm sorry if this is a overly vague question, but
You're good at them. It's your
I
thing.
know it's a skill. The changes that this represents from what's there now, is there a specific result that comes from that? And I'm looking particularly not at the residential sub-district, but the commercial ones on either end. Does this afford a greater build out of commercial business, or is this serving primarily to allow for better services in the area?
That's a great question. It results in two. I'd say the two main functions in the two districts that bookend this. It allows for more density, a little easier planning. Sometimes when you look at dimensional and side setbacks, it's 50 feet in the front, and in town we have a 50-foot setback on business zones, which makes absolutely no sense given the size of some of our lots. And the thought is here, we rewrote this so the buildings can be closer to the street. We want to, there's already 29,000 cars a day going here, many cutting from 495 to 24. Nothing in Easton is creating this traffic. It's already here. So we might as well take advantage of it by bringing buildings closer to the street calming, and a more human scale. So people can, once we get those sidewalks, you really can have walking. People would love to walk on the street now, but it's not obviously very safe. And so it allows for more, more density with more options of placing buildings using, more imagination, more design. And it brings in really what you need, especially going forward. How brick and mortar has been, cycling down for a while. Now we're very limited with what we have for business and industrial zoning in town. We don't want to get rid of that, but we would like to be able to enhance that. I mean, part of that, it's a no-brainer to allow, a limited amount of residences to be mixed in, in the mixed use, which now creates, supply and demand. Now you have people that can help sustain these businesses that are closer, and can add a neighborhood feel, a village feel to this, and tie into that next generation. Everybody's been in the city where they can get everything within a quarter mile. And as they move out, I used to say they'd move out when they started having kids. Now you're seeing many moving out because of COVID and not going back to their offices. But yet they've been spoiled, or I shouldn't say spoiled, but they've been conditioned to be able to get everything without getting into a car within a quarter mile. So let's try to recreate that. Because I really think that is a direction we're going to see a lot of downtowns going.
Yeah, that was my sense, was that this would give a little bit more, but I didn't have the comparison point, so that's useful. The only other question that I have on this is does it create any? Do we find any sort of need for mitigation traffic-wise? So let's assume we're successful and we achieve a little higher density, some additional housing units as the process completes in the residential area for the whatever we called it, et cetera. Are we going to run into any area where this becomes a choke point? Because obviously this is one of the main thoroughfares in town.
Well, part of that's certainly an answer for the traffic engineers, but I would say this: putting the lights in, part of Rick Lincoln's project, right off the bat, that's just going to be as a resident of Pequannock, that is going to be a huge improvement, just because it now starts to manage. There's no management now. You take your life into your own hands, right? But now there'll be management. Going forward, we're not two things. We're not adding that many units. When you consider 29,800 cars a day are going here, we're not going to get anywhere near that. But when they go to rebuild this road, or if, and we're not going to have, these are small properties. So we're not looking at large, we're not going to get 200 unit buildings. We're talking, 2 units here, maybe 4 here, maybe 15 on a larger parcel.
Yeah.
So I don't think anything that would trigger really the need for an in-depth traffic report, but we have the ability that's in our, in our bylaw, in our rules and regs, if that needs to happen. And certainly that'll happen when the state redoes this section of road. That's a prerequisite with any road reconstruction.
Yeah, and I mean, we learned when we were doing the sewer project that we do have a perfectly viable bypass road right there. So, I was just curious if we anticipated a problem. But what you just said about what the increases are reasonably likely to be in the next 10, 20 years, that's sort of almost a silly question. So, anyway, I'm good. Thanks.
No questions are silly here. I'll appreciate it. It's actually a good question. So I think the traffic light really makes a huge difference.
No question.
Anything else? Anybody else have anything? With that, my usual refrain here.
Move to recommend.
Second.
Is that Jeremy? Yeah. All right. Keely,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
D'Amelio,
Yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Excellent. That's 17. All right. 18 is essentially the reason why you're on the call, Greg, because 18 is like 17 pages long. And I was like, I honestly have no idea what this says. So here you go, my man.
Do I, but I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night. So hopefully. No, so 18 and 19 are, we make them look. It's a little secret trick we do at planning board. At town meeting, we're always at the end, and end of the night, it's midnight. People are tired. We work so hard. We just want to get our stuff through. So you change one word in the bylaw, and you have to add 32 pages, and that really that freaks people out. And so they just vote to get you off the stage. So it works for me. But no, 18 and 19. If you did what we did, or if you were working, if anybody that participates in our zoning or uses our zoning bylaw, when you get into the tables, just through the years, there's revisions, you add footnotes, it became a cacophony of confusion. So in light of assuming that everything we've just gone through passes, 18 and 19 at town meeting, 18 and 19 are really just a reorganization of our table of use regulations, and which is 18 and 19 is our table of dimensional and density regulations. X units per square foot, X feet of frontage, etc. It's just a reorganization of it. So
it's effectively just updating this, just to make
Right.
it easier for everybody.
Yep.
There's nothing, to your point before, there's nothing buried on page 17 that's a subtle takeover of all power in the town. But it's designed to make this as unclear as this is for someone that does not deal with zoning in any way, shape, or form on a regular basis. This is clearer than it was based on the updates that you guys are putting through.
Exactly. I mean, I could certainly entertain any questions from in the weeds, but I would loathe to walk you through them, because you'd never invite me again.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything in here that I understand well enough to be able to pin you down on something and try to really hold you to it. But I'm happy to open it up to the more intelligent members of the committee, of which everyone is. Oh, here's Davis. I saw him lean forward.
Oh, sorry. I was just from what you were saying, it sounds like basically this is kind of just like for lack of a better word, like this is just an organizational redo. Like we're not actually really changing substantive like laws, usage rules anywhere. We're just kind of getting everything in better looking and easier to read.
Right. Yes, it does that. This does include the 2 districts, or I'm sorry, the 4 districts of the
Previous
Furnace Village district,
Yeah.
or so it brings in, if you look in there, it talks about how many residential units in a mixed use per lot, or some of them, it reduces the setback, like I was talking about, 50 feet down to 20 feet. Those are in there, other than things related to the Furnace Village District and the laundromat that I walked you through in Article 15. Right, everything else is, there's no other changes, because we can't change it without going through it. It's just a reorganization. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Anyone else on this one? Connor, can we vote on 18 and 19? We have to still vote on them independently, right? But we can effectively go back to back, or can we take them as, let's vote on both of them at the same time? Is that a possibility?
If you are sufficiently clear in your motion, it's fine. You can make a motion, presumably to recommend Article 18 and 19.
Okay. Any other questions before we get to that point then? Anything else that people want to jump into?
I got a question. What is that second to last word on the left side? I've never seen that before in my life.
We're getting that a lot. Eleemosynary. I've been on planning board for, I think, going on 16 years now. I've been to many zoning conferences around the country. I've been to many state meetings. And we are, best I can tell, we're like the only town that has that. And it's somewhere between educational and nonprofit. And in Easton, it's the Stonehill property.
Okay, that makes sense.
But it's fun. It's very popular this year. That's about the fourth time I've gotten that question in presentation.
Jeremy, thank you so much, because I was sitting here and thought it was either a typo or I had missed Greg explaining it.
I had to look it up myself.
I honestly thought it was one of those things that I wasn't going to understand anyway, so I was going to let it ride as part of the
Guys, Google is your friend.
Again, it goes back to ones just throw in something that looks very technical and just hope you get through town meeting.
Connor's sitting there thinking, I have to put up with you clowns. I can't believe this.
And we were peer elected. That's the best part. So at that point then, I will take a motion. If someone would like to verbally put 18 and 19 together, and then obviously give Greg some time back and jump into
Motion to recommend Articles 18 and 19.
Second.
Okay, that was easy. That was easier than I thought. Healy,
Yes.
Stacey,
Yes.
Tamilio,
Yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. All right, so that's 18 and 19. Effectively, they're one and the same. The 2-point pieces that Greg went over were, I thought, ideal for that. Excellent. All right, so that's all the zoning. Mr. Strange, I appreciate you taking the time.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Have a great
Thanks
night,
for letting me jump up. I appreciate it.
and we will see you at special town meeting.
See you up the road. Be safe.
Bye. All right. Connor, we're coming back to you, my man. So that was the latter half of our plan, and now we're on to 2, 4, and 5.
Sure. So this will mostly cover Articles 4 and 5, which are the amendments to the current fiscal year's operating and capital budgets, but it also directly ties into the stabilization fund. So I figure I'll present this now and then take any questions you have, and then work through any particulars on the articles. So thank you for having me. I'm happy to give these updates. There's a couple of minor edits from when I presented it to the select board last week, and I'll note those. So what we're talking about amending the operating budget. So the one that we adopted in June. And so it kind of begs the question, what has changed since then? So as the committee, I'm sure, remembers keenly, the fiscal 21 operating budget that we all adopted in June relied heavily, much more so than typical, on estimates and forecasting on the revenue side due to the unprecedented economic circumstances that we were in relating to COVID, and most significant of which was that our second largest revenue category, which is state aid, was unknown because the Commonwealth had not put forward a budget for that fiscal year. So we are now 4 months into the fiscal year, and the major change is that last month, Governor Baker issued a revision to the fiscal 21 budget for the state for the first time, and it actually included quite good news, given our circumstances, that the Commonwealth intends to level fund state aid to Easton and the other 351 cities and towns for the current fiscal year at last year's level. So we had forecast almost a $1 million cut to that account based on our prior experiences in previous recessions. So typically we would not cheer a level funding year, but under these circumstances, this is great news. Another thing that has changed since when the budget was adopted is we have closed the books on fiscal 20, and we did so in the black. So, which we would always expect in normal times, but is not something you can take for granted with the severity of the economic hit the region and Easton took in the spring. And not only did we meet our budget, we have a free cash estimated around 1.6 million. That's driven almost exclusively by expense turnbacks from spending freezes that were implemented by myself and the superintendent, as well as certain services and spending which just couldn't happen during the more stringent months of the shutdown. So again, that's measured good news. A third major thing that's occurred since the budget was adopted is that we are imminently approaching the regionalization of dispatch. It's something we've been working on formally as a district called SEMREC since 2017 and informally for many, many years before that. So the building project is slated to be completed this weekend, and Easton is slated to move in and dissolve local dispatch in December. And so now that we're that close, we can sharpen our pencils and know that we are going to save significantly more on operating expenses on an annual basis than what we projected. We level funded the fiscal 21 dispatch budget. We now know that we could reduce that by 180,000 and reallocate that into other town departments. And finally, another item that's changed is that the actual cost for the Blanche Ames MSBA project, fiscal 21 has a bond anticipation note there, and that came in 186,000 lower in cost than what we had budgeted. So the net result is that our general fund revenue in fiscal 21 through this amendment will be increased by about $750,000 from what we had anticipated in June, and expenses will do the same because it will continue to be balanced. So those are the good things that have happened since June. So what are the concerns that are still outstanding? So unemployment is still high. Most recently at 6.9%. That's better than a lot of forecasts back in May and June were assuming at this time, but it's still high. Massachusetts unemployment, the most recent data is from September, has been and is higher than the national unemployment rate at 9.6%. So it's still quite significant. Continuing weekly claims for unemployment remain extraordinarily high in the 700,000 range. GDP growth dropped historic levels in Q2 and rebounded at a historic growth rate in Q3. However, the net is that we're still at a lower gross domestic product and economic output today than we were at the end of 2019. COVID, as everyone here I'm sure is aware, the spread of COVID is worsening significantly in the United States, reaching the highest point it's been yet. Obviously, most people's attention last week was on the election, but I think we set 4 records last week, 4 daily records for the most cases in a day, breaking well over 100,000. That, coupled with the continued absence of a new round of stimulus from the federal government, which was something we were talking about in May, that a lot of prognosticators were hoping, Washington could get its act together and do this in a bipartisan fashion. That's not happened. So those two things can pose significant challenge to the tenuous reopening-driven economic recovery to date. Because of that, the long-term shape of recovery is still not known. And finally, although some things have broken in our favor since June, like the level funding of the state budget, history has not been rewritten, and we do still know and generally trust our experience in the past that governmental revenues are typically slow to recover from recessions. So what do we do with that information? The Article 4 budget amendment does 4 things. It maintains a conservative budget posture on the spend side. It improves the balance of our stabilization fund. And we do those things to hedge against long-term economic challenges, which we anticipate will be the norm for years. And we will also protect against immediate challenges if the federal government does not extend the CARES Act and make other stimulus funds available for the schools and emergency response capabilities to the coronavirus as we head into the next calendar year. So going through each of those kind of four main themes on the town budget amendments. So as I mentioned before, we are imminently approaching regionalizing our dispatch services. We now know that that will reduce our spend on dispatch by about $180,000. And this amendment will amend the town department budgets by basically taking that money and moving it, reallocating it into other existing town departments to end wage freezes that about half of our staff took in the spring to help balance the budget. It will fund the station officer model without adding any new police officers, which was agreed to with those unions to make this amount of savings possible. And it will add a half-time clerical position in the fire department. They currently have one full-time administrative person for a 40-plus person department. And because of the changeover in leadership with the chief and the deputy jobs, it is a critical priority. And it's short money in the scheme of our budget to add that half-time person. So the net result there is that this is not increasing our spend level, right? So we're just moving money from one department to others. And so it's still at the total spend level that was already approved by town meeting in June, excepting your reserve fund, which I will get to in a couple of slides. It reduces the town's personnel levels further. So in the spring, we estimated we'd be eliminating 9.5 full-time equivalent jobs. This is now 13. And third, it makes targeted service augmentations with police for the station officer and fire for that clerical to address those operating needs. So the amendments will build reserves in the immediate term, and I'm talking about your reserve account. So as you know, the Finance Committee has a small flexible reserve account for departments to come seek basically emergency reserve transfers in the middle or at any point during a fiscal year without going to town meeting in the event of some unanticipated expenditure coming up. That's typically a $60,000 account. You've used it before for vehicle fixes and smaller items like that. We pumped this account up in the past in anticipation of the MSBA project override because we knew there would be town meeting costs that we didn't really know what they would be. So we put money in there, used it for that, and then put it back at its normal amount. That worked well, I think. I think the committee agreed with that. So this amendment is going to take that idea and do it bigger. So CARES funding, which we've talked about in prior meetings, is federal stimulus money that was made available to cities and towns around the United States back in March for them to use with a fair amount of red tape on in their fight against COVID, because municipal governments, through their fire departments, through schools, police, health departments, are really the tip of the spear on so much of this response. And those dollars can be used for protective equipment for folks who are in ambulances. They could be used for masks at schools, plexiglass, everything that we need to keep doing our job and serve the public. Those funds currently, under the existing legislation, expire in about 6 weeks. So hopefully that gets extended. But if not, that will be a real challenge for us because these funds are an ongoing pool of resources for Easton and every city and town in Massachusetts and in the country. They provide us a vital lifeline for school, public works, police, fire, health to mitigate the not insignificant costs of COVID on our operations. If the U.S. does not expand or pass additional stimulus, the expiration will significantly impact our short-term operational capacity. And so to hedge against this, hopefully not likely failure of the United States to act, this amendment will take $240,000 of that unanticipated state revenue and plug it into your reserve fund, boosting it from $60,000 to $300,000 for the remainder of this year. And what that will do is if CARES is extended and it's not needed, that's great. It would just roll into available funds that could be used next year. If CARES is not extended, this would give the schools, fire, police, health, DPW, the ability that if something came up that we could not absorb in our budget levels that we needed to continue to respond to COVID, that they could come to the finance committee to access those funds. So it creates flexibility and it hedges against hopefully what does not happen, which is if the United States does not expand or extend the CARES Act. Because your reserve fund is technically listed in our budget as a town department expense, that $240,000 shows on the budget summary in the memo I sent you as increasing the town's expenditures. But that's what that is. The actual municipal operating department total spend level is the same as in June. It's just reallocating those dispatch savings. In addition to hedging for the short term, the amendments, as well as Article 2, will help position us better for long-term economic challenges. So this amendment with the stabilization fund article will do two things. One is that it will replace the $500,000 in stabilization that we used in June to balance the budget with that unplanned state revenue. And the second is that will you take a quarter of that estimated free cash from expense savings and combine that for about a $900,000 infusion into the stabilization account. Doing so will put the account at the highest balance it's ever been, about $3.7 million. I had a typo or a misaccounting on my prior memo. I said 4.1 million. I double counted. So 3.7 is the accurate number. Whether it's 3.7 or 4.1 doesn't change. This would be the highest balance the stabilization fund has had ever. And that's great. However, this is being done with kind of a very clear-eyed and sober expectation that we're going to need this next spring and probably for a few years, because that has been our experience in prior recessions. And particularly depending on what shape federal stimulus takes, if any, will have a huge impact on how aggressively we need to draw down on this. And so Wendy and I, and speaking with the superintendent, really felt the right thing to do with this unexpected revenue was put basically nearly all of it in the bank for a couple of lean years. Finally, smaller changes. Debt and interest has been reduced by $186,000. Again, that's because the exempt debt from that debt override on the spending side is exactly whatever the bill that we get is, and it was less than what we thought. And accordingly, the tax levy will be $186,000 less for that as well. And when we made various adjustments to enterprise funds, sewer, solid waste and recycling, cable access and water to reflect the actual expenses and revenue activity for those accounts, which is an increase of $321,000 over fiscal 20 levels. Select Board recently voted a fee increase on the quarterly cost of the town's waste management program to effectively offset the fact that recycling costs continue to skyrocket. And that is a kind of global economic phenomenon that we've been fighting against as much as we can. But the reality is that just for an enterprise account, your revenues need to meet your expenses. The expenses are rising, so those fees will go up in January. These amendments cover part of that.
I promise I'll wash out my recyclables better. I'm sorry.
I appreciate that. Dave Field appreciates that. So this is a summary table. Again, all of this is in the memo that is available online if anyone wants to look at that. If they're watching this meeting, you have the fiscal 20 budget, the 21 budget that we adopted in June, what is being amended, what the kind of net outcome is, and what those changes are. So again, the real big change maker here is about $1 million of revenue from the state that we were not anticipating. We're putting most of that away into reserves. And on the spending side for the town, savings from regionalizing are significantly better than what we had forecasted. And we are reallocating that to end a voluntary wage freeze that our staff stepped up and did to help the town and the community balance the budget. I think I won't read this verbatim because I think I've covered it. So I'm happy to take any questions. This really covers Article 2, which is stabilization, and 4, which is the operating budget. And Wendy and I are both here to answer any questions you have.
So Connie,
oh, sorry. Who's going?
it was Mike. You can go first if you want.
Yeah, just real quick. So if I understand this correctly, number 2, effectively we're voting. I don't know if we're voting on the 400K that's going into stabilization, but does that also vote on the 500K? Is it effectively a 900K net for number 2? Is that the total that we're voting on to transfer into stabilization, the payback and the subsequent new funding? Or does it not matter?
Will Article 2 incorporate both of those, or is the 500 done through the budget?
No, we're going to do the 900 or thereabouts for Article 2.
Okay, so that's Article 2. Thank you. I want to make sure I understood that.
And to be clear, that'll be the exact number. Once we certify free cash, will be in the motion that is
Right.
read on the floor of town meeting. So
Right.
the actual warrant that you're looking at is final, so the language won't change. We always do this with a stabilization article. We leave it general, so that once the exacts come in, we can use those.
Right. I figured we just pin it down for the purposes of tonight.
Sure.
So that's number 1. Number 2 was, it's about the finance committee fund.
The finance committee fund is rolled into everything I just said about amending the fiscal 21 budget,
Right.
Article 4.
It's more about what happens after the fact. And so obviously we've been in the position before. We've gone down that pathway where we've had something has happened. We've had people come and effectively say, hey, can we borrow $20? We say, yes, sure. Here's the $20. Go buy something. But at the end of the year, if, for instance, we don't use any of that and we still have $300K sitting in that account, what happens at the end of the year? Because I don't think we've covered this. Like, do we automatically reduce that back to a $60K? Do we leave that in there for potentially another rainy day? Is there some sort of budgetary measure that reflects that, or are we going to be sitting on a $300K sort of rainy day fund for the ongoing future?
Doesn't
So-
it become free cash and then get allocated to it the next year?
Yes, so it could, but the question as to if we bump this up to 300 for fiscal 21, does it automatically stay available for 22? The answer is no. And but I wouldn't preclude that as a possibility, because if there's still a significant amount of economic volatility, or if, God help us, federal stimulus is still not known in spring of 2021, we may do something similar where we have more in your account than typical. But assuming things level out and there's clarity around whether CARES or something like it gets extended, I think we would drop the account back to 60, and whatever's left would be free cash from that year.
So it would just be another amendment if we did decide to refill it next year. It would be part of the same.
It wouldn't be an amendment next year. It would just be in the budget, in the omnibus budget article at the May town.
Right. Yeah, because it's a line item in the budget. So like any other appropriation in the budget, if you don't spend it at the end of the year, it will just lapse and close to free cash.
Perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure on those two. Mike, all yours.
Yeah. So Connor, I wanted to make sure I was understanding all that was in there. As I'm hearing you, there's close to, if not exactly, level funding from the state, which is more than we were expecting. We're taking that money and we are funding the stabilization fund primarily. There's a few other things, the fix of the wage increases and some of the shifts with public safety and whatnot, but we're funding the stabilization on the theory that next year we're going to be needing that as much, if not more. And that's the main thrust of the changes here. Is that reasonably accurate, or did I just go off the rails?
No, mostly. I just would clarify and break out the excess state revenue. We are taking that and plugging that into the stabilization account and the finance committee reserve. We're not using a dollar of new revenue to fund any town expenses. So the wage free
shift.
will
Okay.
be ended through the savings of regionalizing dispatch. So we're not increasing department spending unless you count the finance committee's reserve. The changes to department spending is coming through savings. I know that's kind of semantics, but I think it's important. We're not taking any of the unplanned revenue and saying, let's spend it. We're putting it in the finance committee reserve account, the stabilization fund. And I believe there are some revisions to our revenue estimates on local receipts, Wendy.
Right. And also we plan to use some of that towards the capital budget.
Right, as one-time money.
Right. And all this seems very prudent given where the numbers are and the expectations for next year. This strikes me as very intelligent. I just want to make sure that I hadn't completely misunderstood you. So cool.
Thank you.
Anything else? This is mostly 2 and 4, frankly.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Connor, and Wendy. So understandably, we're padding the kind of our stabilization money with the expectation of lagging state aid like we saw last time. How do you avoid a situation where we're still pushing money into the stabilization fund like at the expense of putting it into the like how do you kind of balance it so that we hit the point where at some point we're going to start lowering our stabilization because the end is in sight? Or do you know what kind of I'm asking?
I do. You're basically asking how do we thread the needle between appropriately socking money away in the bank and not starving ourselves through austerity, right? And it's a really good question. And if we're all being honest, it's more of an art than a science. Our existing budget is and will remain austere. We eliminated more than 24 jobs in the spring. It was brutally difficult. And we are doing this now to try to prevent doing it again. We're putting money in stabilization now to try and spare everyone that level of severity again come May. But that's going to be something that we need to kind of take an ongoing assessment of. Because although it's good news that the governor put a budget forward, the state still hasn't actually adopted one, right? And I trust the governor and the legislative leaders who have committed to that level fund that they will do it by Thanksgiving is the date they gave themselves. But they're going to basically have Thanksgiving and come back and immediately get to work on the fiscal 22 budget. So I think we all learned this year, never say never. I suppose the budget cycle next year could be crazy for other reasons outside of our control. But I don't anticipate that we will be as in the dark next spring as we were this one. And so I think we'll have better information to work off of about what we can expect on our revenue side in fiscal 22, so that we won't need hope, so that we can hopefully make intelligent choices while staying conservative without being unnecessarily austere. But it is a difficult balance. I think it's important to keep an eye on. If you looked at, so the town has a fund balance policy that sets a goal for our total reserves, our free cash and our stabilization, to be between 7 and 10% of our annual spend level, right? So the goal is whatever you have in your bank could cover 7 to 10% of your annual costs. We never reached that. We were moving in the right direction slowly. At the close of fiscal 19, we were at 6%. But at the close of last year, after taking $500,000 out from our reserves to balance the budget, we dropped to 5.5%. And of that, 3.5% was the stabilization fund. So our stabilization dollars on hand when we closed the books last year was equivalent to less than 4% of what it takes to run the town and the schools. Although our stabilization fund now is going to be at 3.7 million, that's the highest it's ever been in raw numbers. That will roughly be, I don't have the exact, if you give me 1 second, we are talking about 4.5%. So this is a better ratio than we've had in a very long time, but it's comparable to the one that we did have before the Great Recession, and we then burned through that in 3 years, down to 1%. So if I can't imagine I'm going to be before you year after year saying, hey, we found a way to put 900,000 in the stabilization account again and again and again. If I am, throw this in my face, please. But I don't think that this is going to be the case next year. Because some of it, for instance, 400,000 of this is from free cash. Free cash was good news, but there are some factors there, but we don't expect to repeat. For instance, spending freezes are tricks you can pull out of a hat once, and then the spending level drops and you can't cut it again, right? So we can't reproduce that effect again to pump free cash up for fiscal 21, right? So there's a lot of different factors at play that we think free cash will continue to decline because it was before this recession, just as a kind of function of sharpening our pencils on revenue estimates and on expense estimates. And as you do so, your margins get smaller and smaller, your actuals get closer to your estimates, and therefore you have less free cash. So that's one area of focus for us. And on the other side, again, the previous recessions we've been through, it usually takes years for growth to return to state revenue and things like that. So I know that was long-winded. I think it's a really good question. It's a really important one. I'm always interested and open to hearing feedback from all of you if you think we are being too austere. But it's always a real challenge because our toolkit is super limited, right? When you have conversations about austerity. I mean, if we really wanted to we had a structural revenue problem before this all happened, as you were all very aware of. And to meaningfully and structurally address that, your choice as a municipality is to have an override. And given the economic circumstances we were in, that's obviously a difficult conversation to have. So it's a complicated calculus, but for whatever it's worth, we know that we take very seriously and we understand and are generally kind of believers that austerity, perpetually, it has real negative impacts on service levels. And that's not what we want either. We're trying to walk the line and put budgets forward that we think we have some ability to possibly maintain for a couple of years.
Okay.
Connor, I think that was, really well put. And I appreciate Davis, helping you just further elaborate on this. And I'll just say Mike was right too. This is a prudent move. This is an art. It is the thoughtfulness behind this. This is why Easton has been acknowledged for, the work that you and Wendy and the rest of the team have done, and why you've been recognized for putting together award-winning budgets. It's this kind of thoughtfulness and this type of forethought. As we know, yes, it is. We could potentially be walking into a much more difficult 2021. So this is well thought out, and I appreciate all the heavy lifting that went into getting us here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second that one. That's a good one. Anyone else?
I have a question. It might be an impossible question, but are we anticipating or allowed to amend this again? Like, are we anticipating?
So I'm not anticipating amending the fiscal 21 budget meaningfully again. We do typically. So we normally have 2 town meetings a year, which are the only places where you could do that. After the fall one, the next town meeting we have is going to be annual town meeting, where we're going to be talking about the fiscal 22 budget. It is possible that there may be some housekeeping amendments. I would for at that point, fiscal 21 budget will be in its 11th month, so we're not going to have major policy level changes. Wendy, am I
Right.
on that?
No, that's correct.
Yeah. So
If anything, if there's still a balance in the reserve fund, I mean, we may look toward using that as a funding source for some of the articles, but not to add anything, significant that would be new.
Yeah, obviously excess is always better. Thank you.
thank you.
On a mute button. All right. So, from a procedural standpoint, we've talked about, you presented a pretty in-depth breakdown of 2 and 4.
Right.
Is 3 still sort of a placeholder? We don't have anything? Because last time we talked, I don't think there was anything.
3 is a placeholder. Nothing there. It'll stay on the warrant. You don't need to take any opinion on it because it's a placeholder for now. And if nothing comes up, we'll dismiss it on the floor of town meeting.
And then do you want to do 5 now, or should we vote on 2 and 4 and then go into 5? Or does it not? It doesn't really matter, I'm assuming, but.
It's your call. I have slides immediately after this about Article 5, but if you
Motion
want.
to recommend 2 and 4.
There you go.
You like that?
It's nice.
Second.
I heard Jamie first, to Pete's and Jamie. Healy.
Yes.
To be clear, this is for Articles 2, the 900K transfer for stabilization, and Article 4, the aforementioned amendments to fiscal 21, of which there is the link in the existing warrant article that someone can go and look at all these in greater depth. Healy was a yes. Stacy?
Yes.
Tamelio?
Yes.
DePietro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. 2 and 4 are recommended. 3 we're skipping on 5.
Okay, the capital budget. So Article 5 is a supplement to the capital budget, fiscal year 2021 capital budget. This is not atypical for the fall. We normally fund certain things in the spring. We pick some other things up in the fall. What's unique this year is obviously the significant limitation on our revenues available for the capital budget because of COVID. So let me just change my screen here so I could read. The fiscal 21 capital budget that was funded at the June town meeting was pretty austere. The items were limited to time-sensitive and emergency items like the ambulance based on the economic uncertainty. The supplemental 21 funding will address additional time-sensitive, cyclical, and savings-based items with nonetheless a higher rate of deferral than is desirable due to the posture that we're in economically. Given the competing interest for limited available funds, as well as the convergence of longer term financial challenges that we've talked about for a long time now, like the structural revenue deficit that existed before COVID that are now being exacerbated by it, a leaner capital budget such as this one is most appropriate at this time. Deferred items will necessarily add to a capital backlog that we will again revisit in the spring for the fiscal 2022 capital budget. So Wendy and I thought that this was a helpful table just to include for illustrative purposes. So we have a relatively robust capital improvement planning process that's laid out in the town's bylaws. We have a capital planning committee appointed by the moderator, as well as I think some cross-committee appointments, including finance committee. Who review a proposed 5-year capital improvement plan that gets coordinated by Wendy, put through my office, and includes requests from schools, police, fire, every department, where department heads lay out a 5-year look ahead on what their priorities are for capital and asset replacement and repair. And because we have had a structural revenue challenge for many, many years since the last recession that we've been carrying around with us since then, we have not ever frankly, fully funded our general fund capital requests. And so you see here the fiscal year, the annual spend requested and what we actually funded, what wasn't funded, and you get a funding ratio. And as you can see, the average from fiscal 15 through 20 was that we would fund about 2/3 of every capital dollar requested, which is not bad. This fiscal year, even with this supplement, the request was 3.8 million. This supplement will bring us to a total funding of about 1.5 million. We'll be deferring over 2 million. So we're at a funding ratio of 41%, which is slightly below the cheapest year we had in 2017. There's a few reasons for this. We, I think, just spoke at length about some of the broader ones under the operating budget, but I want to bring the focus back to free cash. So free cash is an important funding source that ideally, because it's one-time money, you use for one-time purchases like capital. However, the town has historically relied on about half of that every year to close operating budget deficits that we've carried since the Great Recession. That leaves only half of your annual free cash to do two things: fund your capital and build up your stabilization fund. So it really doesn't, you could have a $2 million free cash certification, which sounds great, but if you follow our financial policies, that basically leaves you with $500,000 for your capital budget. And as you just saw, the annual requests routinely exceed 2 to 3 million. Obviously you could borrow, and we do responsibly, but our free cash certifications have been declining since 2016. Pretty consistently, including as we just closed the books last year. We are happy that the trend continued but did not explode in the wake of COVID, right? So we've dipped about 200,000 a year for a few years, and that continued. But as I said before, we anticipate that some of those were kind of one-time tricks we pulled out of a hat with spending freezes. We had significant layoffs. We're not hopefully going to be doing that again. So that's a long-winded way of me saying that one of the most critical cash sources for capital is tight right now, which is why the capital budget on the revenue side is very limited. So that leads us to this. These are the recommended capital items, the dollar amount, and where we will be funding them from. So as Wendy had indicated, and the capital budget lays out in more detail, When you see taxation or available funds, that is using free cash or some of the excess revenue that we had not planned for. That's because we're treating that as kind of one-time revenue. So all of these items have gone through the capital planning process. They went to the capital planning committee, who voted, I think as recently as 2 weeks ago, to prioritize and recommend these items. And these are the ones I'm recommending funding. You have annual replacement of 2 cruisers and 1 unmarked one, which is a 5-year old vehicle. We have some safety related things for improving parking lots at Richardson Olmsted. That's been being requested for many, many years. I think 6. We'll borrow for that. It's important for the schools. There are some kind of, I believe, and I hope Dave Twombly will not think I'm misrepresenting this, but kind of COVID related or COVID adjacent. Davis, you can affirm this for me. HVAC related items at the schools that were shifted up in their relative priority because obviously adequate airflow is it's always important, but it's extra important under current circumstances. So that was advanced, that you have those there. Computer replacements, town offices, a 10-wheel dump truck for DPW. Dave always does a really good job kind of explaining in detail the level of need for fleet replacement. So currently in DPW, if they want to maintain the current age of their fleet, they need to invest $600,000 a year in their vehicle replacement. We're talking 250 to give you a sense of scale of what we're funding. That's pretty close to the 41% funded for the overall plan. We'll fund a portion of the town's ADA transition plan, a small item for buildings and grounds for mowing. That's pretty important for them to keep up. And then a variety of smaller utility related vehicles across a couple of departments. So what you get is just over 800,000. Again, that'll bring the total capital spend for fiscal 21 to 1.5 million. I think Davis's prior question is still applicable here. You know, how austere is too austere? We think this is kind of a good balance, and we'll revisit it in the spring when we hopefully have a little bit more idea what the next couple of fiscal years will look like. So in summary, you know, we've had some serious structural challenges baked in before COVID hit that budget subcommittee and members of this committee have spent a lot of time reviewing and speaking about with the public. Those challenges will be greater now that we're confronting COVID and its economic impact. This capital budget funds some of our most critical time-sensitive items through available funds, taxation and borrowing. And a lot of what our capital budgets look like in the coming years is going to hinge on what the United States does as far as stimulus, and if they do adopt stimulus, whether or not there are funds for state and city and town government. So hopefully we will know more in the spring. So I'm happy to answer any questions about Article 5.
Open to the floor. I have none.
I have a question. This is more procedural though, and I don't know if it's for Connor, Davis, or Wendy, but how did this prioritization relative in this proposal versus the committee priority listing happen? Like, you know, skipping an 8 and funding a 9 kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the order of events is that departments across the town and school government submit their 5-year capital improvement plan request to Wendy, who collates them into a large 5-year list. Those departments come in and present to Davis and the capital planning committee what their requests are. Sometimes they are explicit in what their own relative priorities are within their departmental requests if funding is not available for all of them. And the committee, working with me and Wendy, then goes through basically with a spreadsheet at the meeting, and the committee votes line by line on what their relative numerical priority is. The committee generally follows, and Davis, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they generally follow, the town's bylaws lay out a kind of hierarchy of needs for what ought to be the first priority. And at the top of that is apparatus relating to life safety and public safety responses. And then you work your way down towards at the bottom of that. The lower priority is like nice to have, that would help make stuff even better, but you definitely don't need it. We never even get close to that in a good year. So the committee ranks those numbers, and then Wendy and I work together, and under the charter, it's my proposal through this process of what I think of those recommended items we can and should fund. So again, that's more of an art than a science. I look at the relative prioritization of the committee. I review it further with department heads. And a lot of times of those conversations are basically what can you live without? It's because no one gets everything they ask for. And we look at the total dollar amounts, right? So you may see here a couple of things like protective clothing for fires, $8,000. That's a lot easier, even if that's ranked 15. That may make the cut when a $1 million request ranked 10 doesn't, right? So you don't just go strictly in order. You have to weigh it against what the total cost is, what the operational impact of not funding it is, and those things kind of vary depending on the department. But this will fund most of, I believe, I could pull the capital memo up. If you give me one moment, the memo that I sent to the committee. And Davis, feel free to weigh in and help me out here, but I think with the June budget and this one, it funds a good chunk of like the top 5 to 10 items, which were ambulance, cruisers, the RO parking lot.
It looks like the top 7 and then like 14 of the top 15, something like that.
Yeah, that looks about right. And just to give you some perspective, Jeremy, just to kind of fill in a little bit on what Connor said. Yeah, we have our 6 criteria from like most urgent to least urgent. Number 1 is imminent threat to health or safety. Number 2 is like, I forget the specific wording, but it's basically like something you need to ensure the continued function. So, kind of like if we don't do this, this thing will stop working. We pretty rarely ever even get past number 2. We're pretty much always confined to those 2. And yeah, so basically, like Connor said, a lot of our requests were related to 1, the annual vehicle requests from all the various departments who need them to do their jobs. And yeah, Connor, you were right about the schools. Basically, they had some upgrades and some maintenance to like ventilation related stuff. And basically their logic was, in COVID times, we know now that one of the big important things is to have a well ventilated area so that, air is going in, air is coming out so that particles don't fester. And so that was kind of our main focus when we met. I think it was about a week and a half ago. Was kind of reevaluating, like, we know COVID's happening, there are going to be students in the schools, at least for the near future. So how do we kind of adapt the money we did just find into fitting like what we know now are the very pressing needs?
Thank you both.
Anything else?
Connor.
Sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was just gonna say, are you finding that, I don't know if it's approach or dollar amount or kind of what I'm trying to get at here, but how does our approach to capital spending planning compare to other municipalities? Are we being more restricted in how we're spending, or is this pretty much in line? Like, are a lot of they're thinking the same way? I'm just kind of curious to get an idea of the bigger picture.
Sure. So first caveat, I'm not as knowledgeable about anyone else's capital plan as ours. I know that from a borrowing perspective, we are in line with good practice. Moody's looks at that every year when they issue our bond rating, right? They like to see a certain amount of your annual spend committed to debt service as a kind of proxy for you're not afraid to spend a reasonable amount of money to invest in yourself because you need to. And so we're pretty good on that front. It's really the available cash capital that we are definitely more conservative than we would like to be. I think this fiscal year, I would assume most of our colleagues are being very conservative for the COVID related reasons we have. But from a structural perspective, we are probably slightly more conservative because of our revenue limitations. There are other communities, for example, where, and again, this is kind of a policy decision, road funding is not a capital borrowing request. They build a certain amount of it into the DPW operating budget. right? So we don't have that, at least not a large amount. And that's something that in a vacuum is excellent and we would like to do, but given our revenue constraints means you would be picking like, okay, what positions, what jobs are we cutting to do it? So we have real challenges there. I would suspect certain communities, ones that have overrides more frequently or ones that have much larger commercial tax bases, are generally have a little bit more flexibility there. So I would definitely say we're conservative. That is also part of why we try, and I think are relatively successful, to net good mitigation from developments to supplement these things, right? So like Avalon, the first one, included millions in sewer capital funding, as well as other general capital funding that financed the feasibility phase of the MSBA project. That would have been really tough if you look at our annual capital spend to get $1 million for a feasibility study. So we were able to get that through negotiated mitigation with other partners. Greg Strange was just talking about how we are trying to get a long-standing traffic need funded through Sawmill, right? So we try to find other ways to get creative and bring those capital needs to the table. As far as our process, I think our process reflects best municipal practice, but as far as available funding, from non-borrowing, we definitely have a tight budget. So did that cover the question? Thank you.
Thank you, Connor.
Anything else from anybody?
Yes, so I was just going to say real quickly, on the actual like allocation order, you might see a big yellow note next to the police vehicle request. So originally, obviously Chief Sullivan, every year he requests 3 marked cruisers as part of his fleet management. And this year he was also requesting an unmarked detective vehicle. And so he actually reached out to the committee and came up to notify us that he wanted to basically downgrade that request. He basically told us, you know, given how tight everything is, I would rather just have 2 marked vehicles and the unmarked detective one, and you can basically just drop the consideration of the 4th vehicle completely. And so I just wanted to note that I think especially given, you know, how much focus was put on the issue of police funding back in the spring. I can't speak for Chief Sullivan, but I think it's fair to say that, you know, it seems to me at least that he made a good faith effort to kind of look at the money he was requesting from the town and to, you know, make sure that he wasn't really requesting more than he needed. So I thought I would just mention that.
Yes, sir. Call out. All right. Anyone else? That's everybody. So with that, I will take a motion for number 5.
Motion to recommend article number 5.
Oh, you beat me. Seconded.
It's 2. All right. So wait, I just ripped my piece of paper off because they're in the room. Healy.
Yes.
Stacy.
Yes.
Temilio.
Yes.
DePietro.
Yes.
Stebbins.
Yes.
And myself is a yes. That is 5. I think that's it, right? 2, 4, 3 is a punt, 5. All right. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Connor, any closing words before you and Wendy shuffle off into the great unknown and don't sit here for our annoying, boring meeting minute discussion that we're sure to have for the next 3 hours?
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. And I will see all of you at town meeting on Monday, November 30th. It'll be pretty similar to what you saw in June. You know, town meetings and pandemics, frankly, don't mix great, but we don't have any other way to legislate, so we'll do our best and make sure that we have all the appropriate safety protocols in place for you and everyone else there. So
We
it'll
put the den in pandemic. That doesn't make any sense, but
Thanks, Mike.
best I could come up with on short notice.
I'm just going to introduce a recall notice for Mike right now, just to see if we can get that taken care of at the same time.
Thank
You
you.
know what?
Thank you, Wendy.
Talk, DePietro.
So it's Monday, November 30th, 7 o'clock at the Ames Sports Complex at Stonehill College. Their campus, those students go home before Thanksgiving and don't come back. So the campus will be empty, just like it was in June. So folks are available and comfortable. That'll be a good way to come spend a night with all of us. So,
Connor, one question on that. I could just because my family and I were using some of the fields there for like hiking and walks. They've closed the front gate of the campus. Do you have any idea if that's going to continue? Just thinking from the public side, if it's something where they have to enter through the back or through the.
We're working with Stonehill now. We had a 20-person logistics meeting this week, and we will issue the Know Before You Go guide with a map for everyone, like we did last time, in the next week or so, pointing to which entrance. I think they already decided. I just can't remember which one, and I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. So we'll publish on social media, on our website, and through ECAT, the Know Before You Go information, including which entrance to use, and we'll make sure it's open so no one's turned away.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you all, and have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks for your
Appreciate it.
support.
Thanks, Wendy.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Down to the rest of us.
Jamie, I'm so happy your lights went off. I've been waiting the whole time.
Every few minutes. Yeah.
I was gonna say I almost want to turn off like my kitchen lights in solidarity.
I'm waiting this whole time, but I didn't see it.
Where are we with meeting minutes? So we've got. Oh, I don't even know where the hell it went. Where is my October send? Last time we talked about this, the conversation was, I think, Jeremy, you had some edits you wanted to provide. The only thing I will say, we can definitely speak to them. The only thing I'll say is that we did not have, where is my participant screen? Stacy did not join tonight, so we're going to probably be coming back to this one similar to the way we did some of the other ones where we had her do minutes after the fact. I can't get rid of my participant list now. There we go. So if you have edits, let's talk through them and make sure we're all on the same page. We can obviously vote on those edits, but then any subsequent, if you have these written down, it would be probably beneficial to either shoot those over quickly to me, which I can then facilitate over to Stacy.
Yeah, I have them written down. Jen write them down earlier in the week.
Oh yeah, duh. Okay.
She's
All
on
right.
top of them.
Yeah.
They're not
Before you
conflict-
go, wait. Before you jump in, does anyone else have any edits that they want to speak to or anything else that comes up? Because I know you have specifics. I want to make sure that I've got everybody else covered. Silence is golden. Hit it, Mr. Tamelio.
I really only one of substance. 3, I went through and changed or wrote down name changes.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.
I know you were trying to do that, so I went through and people I knew I could correct.
Right.
So like Abramson instead of Abramson, Hanato instead of Hanatu. And then the only one of substance is for one of the questions in Article 5, we say cuts are made equally across the board. In a response, something about the police. I don't have it in front of me. But I went back and looked, and we didn't actually respond to that. They asked it, and then you asked Connor if we should skip it, and Connor said it was up to you, and you skipped it. So I was replaced with decision was made to take the question until a later article. That's really it.
Oh, perfect. That's easy.
Yeah, it's not complicated.
I was waiting for you to have like a laundry list. I thought after last week or the last meeting, you were like, I got notes.
No, I knew we didn't say cuts are made equally across the board, and I just had to go back and figure out what that actually was.
At least someone's paying attention to detail, Jeremy. That's what I appreciate. And I just I punted on a question and we just moved on, and you're like, but
yeah,
and we need to make sure the public knows that, Patrick.
Yeah, your drunk with power chair is just arbitrarily ruining it. Okay, so I haven't done this in a while. So to that point, the name piece, I think, is just essentially just a clerical thing. I don't think we actually have to vote on that. But the actual subsequent change that you just outlined, we should vote on that. To be fair, you're bringing it, so you should submit it, and then we should get a second and then vote.
Yeah, should I just make a motion to or accept with amendment?
Yes, as changed.
Okay, so motion to accept the June 10th minutes?
Yep.
Amendment, striking cuts are made equally across the board and replacing with decision was made to table the question until later article.
Second.
All those in favor, let's start with Healy.
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Emilio,
Yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and myself is a yes. Boom. All right, so that's the business for today. We obviously still have on the agenda, as per usual, reports from other boards and committees. I am still a bad Larry and have not been able to get to any of the MSBA association boards. We did submit the 90%. I don't know if anybody else has seen that. Jamie, you might have attended that last one. Do you have anything to add to that one?
No, other than coming in under budget and being able to go back and make some changes to add back in or be able to, spend on what I think were very prudent items. I don't have a list in front of me, but it was great to have that ability and then still have a significant savings even after we went and made some improvements to, the development. So it was a really good meeting if anyone wants to take the time to go back and look. And obviously the whole Blanche Ames, story is a big one because it involves a lot of Oliver Ames high school students that were involved in the layout and the continued development of the interactive side of the school, and it's outstanding. So again, I'll say if anyone has time to kind of go back, Dr. Cabral has done a good job of highlighting that, and students have done an incredible job helping out. And the not PMA, but Perkins Eastman has had nothing but amazing things to say about the students because they brought them into the fold, and their team worked very closely with the students, and they were just absolutely blown away by the ideas that they brought to the table.
Good call out. I will say to build on what you just said, I will say that I think full credit to both teams on our architectural and our design side. Like, can you imagine how much of a different process it would be without those guys? Like the setup and the structure that they put together has been just phenomenal. Like, I'm always consistently blown away by how good they put this thing together, and to see this net $180,000 sort of boon that we got out of it, it's unbelievable. Like, kudos to them and to the students as well. Like, obviously the design choices and the structure they've done is fantastic, but huge shout out for the other side of the team too.
No,
All right, so that's school. Anyone else? Has anyone else had a meeting? It's been COVID-tastic lately, so I know that we kind of just did yours though.
Yeah, I was gonna say we met twice. We did most of our meeting, and then we got the late request from Chief Sullivan, so we had a quick one like 9 days ago. Yeah, you basically heard all the fruits of that meeting during the article, so nothing really further to add.
I do appreciate you calling out that point of the chief, like to shift his economic need based on obviously the process we're going through in town. Like, that's a good shout out as well. It's a shout out.
Sure.
Who else has shout outs? Let's just go through some shout outs just through the rest of the town. Shout out that we're getting another Starbucks, like, woohoo. All right, let's just do that one. Anybody else? Jen, have you had a meeting recently for audit?
We had those 2 audit meetings and nothing since the last time we met. We're supposed to be having another one, but it hasn't been scheduled yet.
Okay. And we don't let Mike be on any subcommittees, so that's by design.
Good choice.
Yeah. All right, with that then, if there's no other comments, if anyone has any points of order or discussions to bring up, Davis looks very excited for a second, so I assume he has
Sorry, I was just gonna ask, I remember there was some, I know, I'm so sorry. There was some discussion about clusters last time. Did we resolve all that? Or is that just something?
Yeah, I thought we did. I think everybody stayed where they were. I think everyone stayed with their existing cluster based on my notes. Everyone stayed with their existing cluster, and then Monday, this next Monday, the 14th, we will vote on 2 applicants who will then obtain the remaining cluster that was open.
Sure.
Quick
Okay.
question on those applicants. Do we get, or is there access to their bios or anything in advance?
There was last time. I'll ping Dottie because I thought of that today when we started the conversation at the top of the meeting. There was a quick sort of snapshot of their like resumes and what they submitted for the
Yeah, well,
process.
there's that online, like there's a link online for where you plug in all your information. Jen will be familiar with this too. There's a link online where you plug in like your information. Sorry, and Jeremy. And I think Jamie, that's basically what they send to us is they just print out those kind of like applications they put in and give them to us. And that's what has all the info.
This was a good point, Jamie. And this was something that I think the date was scheduled before informing all of us. There was a little bit of a delta between when the date was picked and when they told us. So it might be just we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on it. But that's why I sent out that email immediately. So I will do my due diligence and get back and say like who's who and what's what. I spoke to Dottie today. I forgot to bring it up. I'll ping her tomorrow. Good call.
Great, thank you.
All right, with that, it's everyone's favorite time of the day. Who's got a motion for me?
Motion to,
I unmuted too slowly again. Motion to
Yeah.
adjourn. He didn't finish the sentence.
You didn't.
Second.
With that, Healy,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
Melio,
yes.
Petro,
Yes.
Stebbins,
Yes.
and Helen's a yes. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much. We will see all of you who can attend on Monday. Stay safe out there. Bye.
See you Monday.
Bye, friends.
Bye-bye.
Bye.